last step of cleaning and sanitizing a vegetable cooking log is actually sanitizing. So in our case, we're going to use regular bleach. You'll note that here I have Clorox concentrated bleach, and chlorine it's a very strong oxidizer. This is what we want to actually sanitize the baskets. It'll kill off any of those plant or human pathogens. And in our case, we have 8.25% bleach, so it's a little bit stronger than regular household bleach. And then in this basin here, we've already filled it up with water. There's 9 gallons of water in this basin. And essentially, the most important things of working with sanitizer, especially bleach, are you want to make a couple of measurements. And the first measurement is that you want to see how much sanitizer you have in it. So since we're working with bleach, the active ingredient is chlorine. So I have these test strips that measure the free chlorine content, and I'll be using these in a little bit. Bleach is very finicky. So if you're working with bleach, you also want to keep an eye on the pH of the water. The higher the pH is, the more basic. That means that there's going to be more free chlorine available to kill off the pathogens that you want killed. Okay, so before we go and sanitize our picking lugs, I want to show you how to calculate the amount of chlorine to add into your basin of water. What we have here is a formula, and in order to calculate the volume of bleach to add, it's equal to the parts per million of free chlorine that we would like, times the total tank volume, in our case it's 9 gallons, divide that by the percent of bleach, and I mentioned in our case that's 8.25%, times 10,000, and this is just a constant. And our volume is what we're calculating, so that's a question mark. Parts per million of free chlorine. Usually we recommend that we use about 150 to 200 parts per million. And this range is good for if you were cleaning hard surfaces like tables, any contact surfaces. Using 150 to 200 gives you a nice buffer area. So as the chlorine gases off or is eaten up by organic matter, you still have a lot of chlorine in the water to be effective. And then our tank volume, as I mentioned, is 9 gallons. Our percent of bleach is 8.25%. So if we take those numbers and plug them right into the formula, the volume of bleach that we want to add, 200 parts per million is our desired amount of chlorine, 9-gallon tank divided by 8.25% times 10,000, which is the constant. So 200 times 9 is 1,800 divided by 8.25% times 10,000 is 82,500. So if we divide that out, we get 0.0218 gallons of bleach. Since 0.02 is an awkward number of gallons to add of bleach, we're going to multiply that by 4 just to convert gallons to quarts. Then we get 0.08 quarts. That's still kind of awkward to measure out. It's a little less than a quart. So just to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to convert quarts to cups. So 0.087 times 4 is going to be 0.35 cups of bleach. I have a gallon tank of water, and then to make 200 parts per million of chlorine, I'm going to add about 1/3 of a cup of bleach. Next is I am going to add this chlorine, and you see that I'm working with gloves and an apron. This is just so I don't get bleach all over my clothes. I'm going to fill up. This is 1/3 of a cup. And essentially, I'm just going to pour this in our basin. And I just got a brush to stir with. So essentially, I'm just going to stir it up. The next step before we start washing our lugs is to test that we actually added the correct amount of chlorine. So what I'm going to use here are free chlorine strips. I purchased these from Amazon, but you can get these from Walmart, really any pool supply store. I am going to pull one of these strips out, swirl it around for about 10 seconds. There is a scale right on the side of the bottle. You can see that the bottle only goes up to 120 parts per million, and I added 200. So it's going to be a little bit darker than the scale is on the bottle, but you can see that we did add enough chlorine. I recommend testing this about every 15 to 30 minutes You can just take the test of the chlorine concentration because as you're working with dirty baskets, your chlorine will start to be absorbed by the dirt and your chlorine will start to decrease. After I take a chlorine strip, I also like to test the pH. We want to run this because after you add chlorine, the bleach will increase the pH of the water because bleach is very basic. So take the strip, move it around the water a little bit, and then you can see these colors develop. And when I started, the pH was about 7, and now it's about 9. If you were to keep adding bleach to the water, you would eventually need to add an acid and decrease the pH of that water. I want to fill out my log, and this is essentially any time that I'm working with, I have a water treatment log here, and these were developed by Cornell University. So today is July 30th. And then the water pH is 9. And then I just fill these out so I can keep a written documentation of what I'm using.